When you come to a mentoring session, there are some things that you might come up with. It will depend on your relationship and how it's going, but here are some obvious things to talk about. One is personal challenges at work. Now, these may be different sorts of things. One of the issues that we find that a lot of medical students have is balancing their working, their study, their family, their church responsibilities. Managing fatigue can be a big thing as well, and temptations that come up. You might also talk about personal faith. It's always good to check how the person is going with their disciplines of Bible reading and prayer, whether they're actually going to church, how involved they are in church, just touching base with that. Another aspect is relationships. How are they relating to people in the workplace, fellow students? How about their family relationships? How are those relationships going? Relationships can be something that can really pull at us in terms of our faith. There may be some ethical challenges at different times that they specifically want to address. There can be the big topics like euthanasia or abortion that can come up in a medical situation, or there may be just some daily ethical challenges that they're facing that they want some advice. How do they respond to those things? And finally, another big area that people often want to talk about in the mentoring session is your actual Christian witness in the workplace. How do you begin to have those spiritual conversations? What does it look like to be a person of faith as a doctor or a dentist? Those are some really good areas to discover. I think accountability is a really important thing that we're often missing for our church services. So these days, we often don't get to do public confession of sin, for example, and sometimes we maybe find it difficult to disclose what's really happening in our lives in terms of sin issues. It's important to establish trust, and it's important to be able to get to a point where eventually you can talk about some of your weaknesses, some of your failings, or even specific areas of sin. Another book that I really want to recommend is this book by Ed Welch, Side by Side, which is a great resource for mentoring as well. In this book, Ed talks about what happens when someone actually discloses to you an area of sin in your life, in their lives. And the first aspect, he says, is don't leave it just at commiserating. It's good to commiserate with someone when they tell you about an area of weakness, but don't leave it at that. It's important to go to the next step, which is actually go to the heart of the issue. What is actually causing that sin to happen, and what is going on in that person's life that means that this has become such a problem. The third aspect is to actually think about making a plan for how you're actually going to deal with this sin. And something that you can work together on and be accountable for. It's good to admit that the nature of growth and maturity is actually really messy in the Christian life. It's often not just a growing stronger. We actually experience ups and downs in our Christian growth, and it's good to admit that that's part of being a Christian and growing more mature. And finally, it's important to pray through the issue, actually together to really go in deep into that issue and pray about it. I think this is such a significant part of mentoring that sometimes we don't get in any other area of our Christian life. So I encourage you to be open about accountability. Prayer is such a significant part of mentoring. Remember, if you are the mentor, at all times you're modeling what it means to be an active Christian. And in prayer, you're actually modeling what prayer looks like as a mature Christian. It's good to model and encourage prayer, and you do that in a number of ways. One is to always make it a point to pray with your mentee when you're together in a mentoring session. It may be the mentor prays for the mentee only, or it may be that you pray together about different issues. The next aspect is to remember that you don't just leave the prayer for the mentoring sessions. Pray for the mentee at regular periods. Make sure you actually diarise it as a mentor to pray for your mentee. And mentees, remember to pray for your mentors as well. You need to teach your mentee to pray. There's a couple of different techniques of doing this. One really effective thing is the crafted prayer. This is where you work together on a prayer that's really specific to what the mentee is going through at that time. It's a prayer that they can pray on a regular basis that can really help them grow in their faith. Another thing to teach the mentee to do is continuous prayer. There are some different techniques for this. One of the ways is to pray as you go somewhere, pray while you're there, whether it's an alarm that goes off or a regular thing that reminds you to pray, and before you meet someone, you remember to pray for that meeting. And then pray as you leave the place where you've been as well, and commit that place to the Lord. So remembering to teach the person to be continuous in prayer is really good as well. Share specific prayer points. Encourage the mentee to be specific about prayer. And if you're in a relationship of trust, be prepared to share specifically as a mentor what your prayer points are as well. Prayer demonstrates many things. It demonstrates your relationship with God, but it also demonstrates that you've been listening to each other. It's a way of imparting wisdom, and it's also a way of really encouraging the other person. So prayer is central to the mentoring relationship. Ending the mentoring relationship can happen in a couple of ways. It can be a really natural ending, and sometimes, unfortunately, there are endings which are not so comfortable. But let's go towards the natural ending spots. As we've said, the initial agreement to mentor is for 6 months and then a review, and preferably a year. So at the end of the year, you may decide that that's a natural place to end the mentoring relationship. But mentoring relationships can end for other reasons. Sometimes the mentee moves away for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes sickness can intervene. Sometimes for the mentor may actually be placed in a different situation. These are just natural things that happen in busy lifestyles, and it's okay to accept that and understand that. It may be possible to continue the mentoring relationship even though you're not able to meet face-to-face anymore, but that may also be a natural time when you agree that that's the ending of the mentoring contract. Another way of ending is when you feel that the outcomes have been achieved, when you feel that the mentee has learnt as much as they can from the mentor, or the mentor feels that it's time for the mentee to be handed over to a new mentor. And it's good at that point to recognise that and to end the relationship. Sometimes things can go a bit wrong, and sometimes this can be as simple as the two of you just don't get along. Personality clashes can happen. You can feel that there's no real connection happening, or that you don't feel that there's been any trust that is developing. Now, we're human beings, we don't get along with everybody, and it's good at that point, rather than trying to force it, to just accept that maybe this is the time to end it. And you can talk to your CMDFA Mentor Initiative Coordinator, and they can actually work out to link you both up with other people. So don't be hesitant about doing that. The important thing is to try and end well, to maintain mutual respect of each other, and to be able to send each other off in a good spirit.